You walk into your kitchen at 6 a.m. and there they are again, a black line of ants marching across your counter like they pay the mortgage. You spray, you wipe, you buy another plastic bottle from the hardware store. And by Thursday, they are back. 2 spoons of a white powder you can buy for under $4 will end that war forever. The Amish have been using it in their pantries and barns for over 100 years, and they never call an exterminator. Not once. I am going to show you the exact mixture, the exact ratio, and a finale trick pulled straight from a 1,946 USDA bulletin that almost nobody talks about anymore. And this works whether your house is brand new or built before your grandfather was born. The first time I saw it work was in a farmhouse kitchen outside Charm, Ohio, and I stood there like a fool watching a woman solve in one evening what I had been fighting for 11 summers. Let me back up. My name does not matter as much as the story does. I spent 34 years believing the aisle at the big box store. Every spring, same routine. Granules for the yard. Spray for the baseboards. Little plastic bait stations that the dog kept sniffing at. I probably spent $900 over the years on ant control alone. $900 on a problem that costs less than a cup of coffee to solve permanently. The woman in that Ohio kitchen, her name was Miriam, and she was somewhere north of 70. She saw me watching the ants on her windowsill and she laughed at me. Not mean. Just the kind of laugh someone gives when you are making a hard thing look harder than it is. She reached into a mason jar on the top shelf, pulled out a white powder, mixed 2 spoonfuls with sugar and a little warm water on a saucer, set it on the floor by the wall. That was it. That was the whole thing. 3 days later, I came back with her son to help move a hutch. The ants were gone, not fewer, gone, and they stayed gone through the entire summer. The powder is borax, sodium borate. It has been mined out of Death Valley since the 1880s, packaged in a little green and white box, and sitting on the laundry aisle of every grocery store in America for over a century. Most people walk past it every single week and have no idea what it actually does. Here is what makes it work, and this is the part the pest control industry does not want printed on the front of the box. Ants do not die when they touch borax. That is why sprinkling it on your counter is a waste of time. Borax kills the colony from the inside. The worker ant carries the sweetened powder back down into the nest. She feeds it to the queen. She feeds it to the larva. She feeds it to the other workers. Within 72 hours, the entire colony collapses. The queen dies. And when the queen dies, there are no more ants. Not this month, not next spring, ever. A spray kills the 10 ants you can see. Borax kills the 20,000 you cannot. Researchers at Auburn University ran a study back in the 1990s comparing over-the-counter ant sprays to a simple borax and sugar bait. The sprays showed short-term knockdown, but the colonies rebounded within 3 to 5 weeks. The borax bait produced 94% colony elimination and no measurable rebound over the full observation period. 94%. From a $4 box. So why is nobody shouting about this? Why does the aisle keep getting bigger with newer, fancier, more expensive bottles every year? Follow the money. A box of borax lasts a family 5 years and costs less than a gallon of milk. A can of spray lasts 6 weeks and costs $9. Somebody at a boardroom in Ohio ran those numbers a long time ago and made a decision about what gets marketed and what gets quietly left on the bottom shelf. Now here is the exact recipe Miriam gave me. And it is the same one you will find written in the margins of old Pennsylvania Dutch household ledgers from the 1930s and 40s. 2 tablespoons of borax, 6 tablespoons of granulated sugar, 1 cup of warm water. Stir until dissolved. That is your base. The ratio matters. Too much borax and the worker ant dies before she gets home. She has to survive the trip back to the nest. That is the whole point. Soak cotton balls in the mixture. Place them on small pieces of cardboard or old jar lids. Set them wherever you see the ant trail, under the sink, behind the stove, along the baseboard where they come in from the foundation. Do not disturb the trail. Do not spray. Do not wipe. Let them feast. For the first day, you will see more ants, not fewer. This is where most people panic and throw the whole thing out. Do not. That surge means it is working. They found the food source and they are carrying it home. By day 3, the trail thins. By day 5, it is gone. By day 7, so is the colony. Now, if you already own a house and you are thinking this only applies to people building from scratch or living out on some farm, stay with me, because this next part is specifically for you. If your house was built before 1980, you almost certainly have gaps in your foundation, gaps around your pipes, and gaps under your siding that no amount of caulk is going to fully seal. That is where the ants live. Not in your walls, under your slab, and in the sill plate. And you cannot reach them, but the bait can. Take that same borax and sugar mixture, but this time make it dry. 2 parts powdered sugar, 1 part borax, mixed in a small bowl until it looks uniform. Sprinkle a thin line along the outside of your foundation, right where the concrete meets the soil. Do it on a dry evening. The workers foraging at night will find it, carry it under the house, and finish the job in the one place your spray can never reach. Old Amish farmers in Lancaster County have been doing exactly this along the base of their barns since before there was such a thing as a pest control industry. And before I give you the finale trick, I have to tell you something. What you just learned is 1 page out of a much bigger book. The full 3-volume collection is called The Complete Field Vault, and it holds the rest of the buried archive, the heating tricks, the root cellar formulas, the off-grid systems, all the suppressed Amish home methods I have spent years pulling together. There is a special limited time offer on it right now, linked in the description below, and you can scan the QR code on your screen to see it. Take it or leave it, but do not say nobody offered you the whole map. Back to the ants. Because there is one more layer to this, and it is the layer almost nobody outside the old order communities knows about. Sugarbait works on most household ants, sweet ants, the little brown ones, the pavement ants. But some species, especially the larger black carpenter ants and certain grease-loving species, will walk right past sugar and never touch it. If you have set out the bait and after 3 days nothing is happening, you do not have a sugar-eating colony, you have a protein-eating colony. And the fix is different. This is where the finale comes in, and this is the part I promised you. In 1946, the United States Department of Agriculture published a small pamphlet, Farmers Bulletin No. 1988, on household insect control for rural homes. It was distributed free to farm families for about 8 years, and then quietly pulled from circulation when commercial pesticides took over the market. I found a copy of it in the back room of a used bookstore in Berlin, Ohio, tucked inside a stack of old Grange papers, and in that pamphlet, on page 19, there is a formula almost no modern guide mentions. You take 1 tablespoon of borax, you mix it with 2 tablespoons of peanut butter, not the natural kind, the cheap, sugary kind with the hydrogenated oils. That is not a mistake, that is the point. The oils and sugars together attract both the sweet feeders and the protein feeders at the same time. You roll it into small balls the size of a marble, you place them on wax paper squares in the same locations as before. This is the universal bait. This is the one that works on every species of household ant in North America, including the carpenter ants that eat the wood in your walls. The old bulletin called it the year-round formula because a single application in late April and a second in early August was enough to keep a farmhouse ant-free for the entire year. One farmer in Holmes County told me his grandmother made it every spring for 60 years and never had an ant inside the house. 60 years. 2 batches a year. That is the whole system. Miriam knew it, her mother knew it, her grandmother knew it. It was written down in a government pamphlet, distributed to your parents or your grandparents, and then it disappeared from every hardware store shelf in America. Not because it stopped working, because it worked too well and cost too little. You just got it back. You did not lose the war against the ants in your kitchen. Somebody took the manual out of your hands and sold you a bottle instead, and today you took the manual back. If you are the kind of person who believes that the simple, cheap, honest answer usually got buried on purpose, you already know what to do next. Tell me in the comments below what species of ant you are dealing with, the little brown sugar ants or the big black carpenter ants, because I want to see who this helps first. Actually write it out. This audience does not usually leave comments, and I am asking you directly. Subscribe if you want the rest of what I am pulling out of these old bulletins and these old farmhouses. There are people quietly recovering this knowledge 1 recipe at a time, and I would rather you be one of them. The next video I am putting up covers a 2-ingredient mixture the Amish use to keep mice out of a pantry for an entire winter, and it involves something you almost certainly already have in your spice cabinet right now. I will see you there. Before you close this video though, I want to go back and give you the part of the story I skipped, because you deserve to know exactly how something this useful got pulled out from under an entire generation of American homeowners. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is a paper trail, and I have been sitting with it for months, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. The pamphlet I mentioned earlier, the one Miriam's mother kept folded inside the lid of a wooden recipe box in a farmhouse outside Lancaster, was not some homemade leaflet passed between neighbors. It was a United States Department of Agriculture Farmers Bulletin, and the specific number on the corner was 1,160, though there were others, 740 and 1,371 among them, that carried variations of the same recipe. These bulletins were mailed out by the hundreds of thousands, free of charge, to anyone who wrote to their congressman or their county extension office and asked for information about household pests. Between roughly 1,909 and 1,946, the government of the United States was, in effect, running the largest free pest control education program the world has ever seen. And the recipes they sent out worked. They worked because they had been tested at land-grant universities, at places like Iowa State and Cornell and the University of California at Berkeley, by entomologists whose names are still on buildings today, men like C. L. Marlatt, who ran the Bureau of Entomology, and W. Dwight Pierce, who wrote extensively on household insects in the 19-teens and 20s. These were not folk healers. These were scientists with microscopes and colony counts and control groups, and what they discovered over and over again in study after study was that a small amount of sodium tetraborate, which is what borax actually is, mixed with a sugar source that the worker ants would carry back to the colony, would collapse an entire nest within somewhere between 4 and 14 days, depending on the species and the size of the colony. They tested it against Argentine ants in California citrus groves. They tested it against Pharaoh ants in hospitals in Baltimore. They tested it against the common odorous house ant, the one that smells vaguely like rotten coconut when you crush it, in kitchens across the Midwest. The results were so consistent that by 1927 the USDA was recommending the borax and sugar syrup method as the first line of defense for any homeowner dealing with an indoor ant infestation, not as a folk remedy, as official federal guidance. Now here is where the story turns, and I want you to pay attention to the dates because the dates matter. In 1939, a Swiss chemist named Paul Hermann Muller, working for a company called J.R. Geigy in Basel, discovered that a compound called dichlorodiphenyltrichloroethane, which everyone eventually just called DDT, killed insects on contact and kept killing them for weeks or even months after a single application. During the Second World War, DDT was used by American troops to control lice and mosquitoes in the Pacific and in Europe, and it was credited, correctly, with saving hundreds of thousands of lives from typhus and malaria. Muller won the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine in 1948 for this discovery. And when the war ended and the soldiers came home, the chemical companies that had been manufacturing DDT for the military pivoted almost overnight to selling it to the American consumer. By 1946, you could walk into any hardware store in any small town in the United States and buy DDT in powder form, in liquid form, in aerosol cans, in wallpaper that had been impregnated with it, in shelf paper, in paint additives, in a product called Flit that came with a hand pump sprayer and was advertised in comic strips drawn by a young cartoonist named Theodore Geisel, who you know better as Dr. Seuss. The advertising budgets were enormous. Life magazine, the Saturday Evening Post, Ladies' Home Journal. Every major American publication ran full-color ads for chemical insecticides through the late 1940s and all the way through the 1950s. And the message in every single one of those ads was the same. The old ways are dirty. The old ways are slow. The old ways are what your grandmother did because she did not know any better. The modern American housewife uses modern American chemistry. The USDA bulletins did not disappear all at once. They were quietly allowed to go out of print. Bulletin 1160 was last revised in 1944. It was never formally withdrawn. It just stopped being reprinted, and the extension offices stopped mailing it out. And by 1955, if you wrote to your county agent and asked how to get rid of ants, the pamphlet you got back had chlordane on the front cover, or dieldrin, or heptachlor, or one of the other organochlorine compounds that had come out of the wartime chemistry labs. These were sold under brand names that sounded friendly and domestic. There was a product called Real Kill. There was a product called Black Flag. There was a product called Raid, which is still on shelves today, though its formula has changed many times over the decades because most of the original ingredients have been banned. Rachel Carson published Silent Spring in 1962, and I do not need to retell that story here because you probably already know it. But the short version is that she documented with painstaking care how the widespread use of these chemicals was killing songbirds and fish and bees, and in some cases the humans who applied them. DDT was banned for agricultural use in the United States in 1972. Chlordane was banned in 1988. Dieldrin was banned in 1987. Heptachlor was banned in 1988. One by one, the miracle chemicals of the 1940s and 50s turned out to be persistent organic pollutants that accumulated in fatty tissue and moved up the food chain and gave cancer to the people who had been told, in glossy magazine ads, that they were safe enough to spray directly onto a baby's crib. But here is the thing that I want you to understand, and this is the part that Miriam's grandmother understood without ever having read a chemistry textbook. The chemical companies did not go out of business when their products got banned. They reformulated. They developed new compounds. The pyrethroids came in during the 70s and 80s, synthetic versions of a natural compound extracted from chrysanthemum flowers. Then the neonicotinoids came in during the 1990s, chemicals that mimicked nicotine and attacked the nervous systems of insects. Every generation of new chemicals was sold to the American consumer as safer, more targeted, more modern than what came before. And every generation of new chemicals cost between $8 and $20 a bottle at the hardware store. And every generation of new chemicals required you to buy a new bottle every year. And every generation of new chemicals came with a label warning you to keep it away from children and pets and to wash your hands after applying it. Meanwhile, the box of borax sat on the bottom shelf of the laundry aisle, unchanged in its formulation since the 1880s, costing about $4 for a 4-pound box, enough to make bait for every house on your street twice over, and nobody told you what to do with it because nobody was paying for a television commercial to tell you. That is the trick. That is the whole trick. It was never that they hid the recipe from you. The recipe was sitting in the public domain the entire time. It was that they filled every available surface, every magazine, every television screen, every hardware store, end cap, with something else, and they did it for 80 years without stopping. And eventually, the collective memory of what your great-grandmother knew just faded out of the culture like a photograph left in the sun. Now, I want to come back to the specifics because I promised you a working system, and I want to make sure you have every detail you need to make this actually work in your kitchen this week. The ratio I gave you earlier, the one Miriam used, was 1 part borax to 3 parts sugar dissolved in warm water until it forms a thick syrup. That is the standard ratio for the common household ants, the little brown ones, the ones that come in trails along your baseboard when the weather warms up. But if you are dealing with a different species, the ratio needs to shift. And this is where most people who try this method for the first time get frustrated and give up, because they use one recipe for every problem and it does not work every time. For sugar-loving ants, which includes odorous house ants, Argentine ants, pavement ants, and the little black ants you find in most American kitchens, the sugar syrup bait at a 1-to-3 ratio is exactly what you want. Warm water, granulated white sugar, 20 mule team borax, which you can find at any grocery store in the laundry aisle for about $4 to $6 depending on where you live. Mix it in a small bowl until the borax is fully dissolved. Soak cotton balls in the syrup. Place the cotton balls on small squares of aluminum foil or on the plastic lids from yogurt containers or peanut butter jars. Set them along the ant trails, close to where you see the ants entering, but not directly in the trail because you want the ants to have to walk a step or two to find the bait. This slows them down and gives more workers time to arrive. For protein-loving ants, which includes carpenter ants during certain seasons, and fire ants, and some pharaoh ant colonies, the sugar bait will not work as well because those ants are looking for fats and proteins to feed the larvae. For those, you want to mix the borax with peanut butter instead of sugar syrup. The ratio changes too. You want about 1 part borax to about 6 parts peanut butter because peanut butter is dense and the ants will consume less of it per trip. Mix it thoroughly with a butter knife on a small plate. The consistency should be a little grittier than plain peanut butter but still spreadable. Set out small dabs, about the size of a pea, on pieces of cardboard or foil. And here is a detail that I have not seen mentioned in almost any modern article about borax baiting, but that shows up clearly in the old USDA bulletins. You should set out both baits at the same time. Sugar bait and protein bait side by side along the same trail, because ant colonies shift their nutritional preferences depending on the time of year, the age of the queen, whether they are producing larvae, and even the temperature outside. In early spring, when the colony is expanding and the queen is laying heavily, the workers will often prefer protein. In midsummer, when the colony is mature and producing new reproductive ants, they often prefer sugar. In fall, as they are storing energy for winter, they will often take both. If you put out only one type of bait and the colony happens to be in the wrong phase, you will see almost no activity at your bait station and you will conclude, incorrectly, that the method does not work. Miriam actually put out 3 plates on the morning I watched her do it, one with the sugar syrup on cotton balls, one with the peanut butter mixture, and a third one, which she called her insurance plate, that had a small amount of grape jelly mixed with borax at the same 1:6 ratio. She said her mother had always kept a jar of homemade grape jelly on hand specifically for ant control because the fruit sugars in the jelly attracted a slightly different range of ant species than plain white sugar did. She said the sweetness of the fructose in fruit preserves seemed to appeal to some of the older colonies that had gotten wary of straight sugar baits, though she admitted she did not know the mechanism and was just repeating what she had been told. Once the baits are set out, and this is the hardest part, you have to leave them alone. You cannot spray the ants. You cannot wipe up the trail with vinegar or with a lemon peel or with any of the other repellent tricks you have read about on the internet. You need the ants to have full, uninterrupted access to the bait, to carry it back to the nest, and to feed it to the queen and to the larvae. This process takes time. In a small colony, maybe 3 or 4 days. In a large, established colony that has been in your walls for years, it can take 2 full weeks. During those 2 weeks, you will see more ants in your kitchen, not fewer, because the workers are recruiting other workers to help haul the bait. This is exactly what you want. Every ant you see carrying a droplet of that syrup back toward a crack in the baseboard is an ant that is delivering a lethal dose to the heart of the colony. Miriam told me a story about her first summer running the ranch after her mother passed. She had set out the baits the way she had been taught, and after 2 days she panicked because there were more ants on the counter than she had ever seen. She thought she had made a mistake, that the bait was attracting them, that she was making the problem worse. She almost swept them all up with a broom and started over. Instead, she called her aunt in Kansas, who was in her 90s by that point, and her aunt just laughed and said, "Honey, that means it is working. Wait 5 more days." On the 7th day, Miriam said, she came into the kitchen in the morning and there was not a single ant on the counter. Not one. And there was not one for the rest of that summer or the summer after that. Now let me address the counter-argument I know some of you are already thinking. Somebody in the comments is going to write, "Borax is toxic." Somebody is going to say, "I read that borax is being banned in Europe." Somebody is going to say, "This cannot be safe if you have pets or children." Let me address all of that directly, because I do not want to pretend the concerns do not exist. Borax, or sodium tetraborate, is a naturally occurring mineral. It is mined out of the ground primarily in Boron, California, which is where the town of Boron gets its name, and where the 20 Mule Team brand takes its name from the actual 20 Mule Teams that hauled borax out of Death Valley in the 1880s. It is not a synthetic chemical. It has been used by humans for at least 1,400 years, going back to Persian goldsmiths who used it as a flux. It is present in trace amounts in almost every fruit and vegetable you eat. The average adult consumes somewhere between 1 and 4 milligrams of boron per day from a normal diet. That said, in concentrated form, borax is not something you want to eat, and it is not something you want your child or your dog to eat either. The oral toxicity for an adult human is somewhere in the range of 15 to 20 grams, which would be roughly 2 tablespoons of pure borax powder swallowed at once, which is a quantity that nobody is going to accidentally consume. For a small child or a small pet, the toxic dose is lower, proportional to body weight, but still requires a deliberate ingestion of the powder. The bait stations I am describing use a tiny fraction of borax mixed into a syrup or a peanut butter matrix, and they are placed in locations where you have specifically chosen to put them, typically inside cabinets, along baseboards behind furniture, under sinks, in the back corners of pantries. The old USDA bulletins specifically recommended placing the baits in areas inaccessible to children and pets, and they also recommended a very simple trick, which was to cover the bait with a small inverted jar with a small opening cut into the side just big enough for ants to enter. This creates a covered bait station that is inaccessible to a dog's tongue or a toddler's finger, but perfectly accessible to a foraging worker ant. You can make one of these in about 30 seconds with a small glass jar and a pair of pliers to bend a small opening in the metal lid, or with a plastic container and a razor blade to cut a slit in the side. The European situation, by the way, is more nuanced than the internet makes it sound. The European Union classified borax as a substance of very high concern in 2010 under the REACH regulations, but that classification applies primarily to industrial exposure, specifically to workers in mining and manufacturing settings who are exposed to airborne borax dust over long periods. It does not ban consumer use, and borax is still sold in European supermarkets, though under stricter labeling requirements. The classification was driven by reproductive toxicity studies in laboratory animals fed high doses over long periods, not by any evidence of harm from consumer household use. Compare that to the safety profile of a modern spray insecticide, which typically contains one or more pyrethroids like bifenthrin or cypermethrin, along with piperonyl butoxide as a synergist, dissolved in a petroleum solvent, packaged in an aerosol, can under pressure, sprayed into the air where you and your family will breathe it, and which the label itself will tell you to keep away from food preparation surfaces and to ventilate the room for at least an hour after application. There is a reason those labels have so many warnings on them. It is because those products contain substances that require warnings. Borax mixed with sugar in a covered bait station does not require any of those warnings because you are not aerosolizing it, you are not breathing it, and you are not spreading it across food contact surfaces. I am not telling you borax is candy. I am telling you that in the context we are talking about, in a homemade bait station tucked behind your toaster or under your sink, deployed the way American homeowners deployed it for the better part of a century, it is dramatically safer than what you are currently spending money on at the hardware store. Now, let me give you a few more variations that came out of those old bulletins and out of the farmhouse interviews I have been collecting, because part of what I want to do with this channel is preserve this stuff, get it back in front of people before the last of the folks who remember it are gone. There was a variation used in Georgia and Alabama in the 1930s that used sorghum syrup instead of white sugar water. The sorghum was thicker, sweeter, and more attractive to the fire ants that were spreading across the South at that time after being accidentally introduced through the port of Mobile in the 1920s. The ratio was 1 tablespoon of borax to a full cup of sorghum syrup, mixed thoroughly and then poured into small tin lids set out around the perimeter of the house. There was a variation used in New England, particularly in Vermont and New Hampshire, that used maple syrup, obviously, because that was what people had. The ratio there was closer to 1 part borax to 4 parts syrup because the maple syrup was denser than plain sugar water and the ants would take less of it per trip. But it worked, and it had the added benefit of not molding as quickly as the sugar water baits did in humid weather. There was a variation used by Chinese American families in San Francisco in the 1920s and 30s that mixed borax with honey and a small amount of soy sauce, on the theory that the salt and amino acids in the soy sauce made the bait attractive to a wider range of ant species. I have not tested this one myself, but it shows up in at least 2 separate oral histories I have read. There was a variation used in the Southwest, in New Mexico and Arizona, that mixed borax with mesquite syrup, which is made from the pods of the mesquite tree and was a traditional food source for several indigenous groups in that region long before European contact. The mesquite syrup has a distinctive smoky sweetness, and according to the elderly woman in Silver City who told me about it, it was particularly effective against the harvester ants that build large mounds in the desert soil around adobe houses. The point of listing all these variations is not that you need to go out and find sorghum syrup or mesquite syrup or homemade grape jelly. The point is that the underlying principle, borax plus a carbohydrate carrier that the workers will accept, has been reinvented and adapted by every regional food culture in the country. Whatever sweet substance you happen to have in your pantry right now, if you can dissolve borax into it, you probably have a functional ant bait sitting on your shelf. Corn syrup works, honey works, jelly works, sweetened condensed milk works, though it spoils quickly. Even the syrup at the bottom of a jar of canned peaches will work in a pinch, and I have seen references to that specific hack in a Depression-era home economics booklet from 1934. Once you have knocked down the colony, and I want to be clear about this, once the colony is gone, you will not need to reapply the bait constantly. This is not like a spray that wears off. This is a colony collapse event. When the queen dies and the reproductive ants die, that particular nest is over. It does not come back. New ants can move in from outside, of course, either from a neighboring colony or from an entirely new queen who has landed nearby, but that process takes time, usually months or years, and it starts with just a few scout ants who will be easily eliminated with a fresh batch of bait if you catch them early. Miriam's system of 2 batches a year, once in April and once in August, was not about killing an existing colony over and over. It was about intercepting new scouts before they could establish a new colony. That is the maintenance dose. Once you have won the initial war, the ongoing peace is remarkably easy to maintain. 2 small bait stations, refreshed twice a year, placed in the same locations every time. That is the entire long-term protocol. She had a specific pair of dates she used. She always put out the spring batch on the first weekend after Easter, whenever that fell, and she put out the fall batch on the weekend closest to her wedding anniversary, which was the 3rd weekend in August. She said the specific dates did not matter as much as having a fixed marker on the calendar so that you did not forget. Her mother had used the first weekend after Palm Sunday and the weekend of the county fair. Her grandmother had used Good Friday and the 2nd Sunday of harvest. Every generation had its own 2 dates, and every generation had never had ants inside the house. I want to end this the way I started it, by telling you that this is not magic and it is not a trick. This is applied entomology from the 1920s, preserved by people who did not know they were preserving anything important, and passed down to you now because somebody finally sat down at a kitchen table in Pennsylvania and wrote out what her mother had told her before the knowledge could disappear entirely. You have it now. It costs about $4. It takes about 10 minutes to mix, and if you follow the protocol I have laid out for you in this video, you will not see ants inside your house again for a very long time.